the latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. To my new and old and returning subscribers, I say thank you. Those who are liking, sharing, commenting, I appreciate you all. The ex-Prime Minister of Mali have given us shocking revelations concerning why member states of Ecowas are leaving the bloc. That's the Ecowas ideology, or how Ecowas came into being. These ideas started from Mali. Ecowas is something that, if there is anybody that will champion the agenda, should be Malians. But the most painful aspect is ECOWAS, that's supposed to be for the ideologies of Africa and championing the freedom and the Pan-Africanism, has become a political organization that is only for the interest of the West.
Now, to return to the Ecowas, every time there were summits of the Ecowas, it was the French president, the French media, who announced the conclusions. So when the sanctions were to be imposed, the illegal and illegitimate sanctions against the Malian people, they were announced long before. And when they were held, you saw the exit of the Malians on January 14th, 2022, which is now called the National Day of Recovered Sovereignty. The Malians said no. And what did we see? The ECOWAS began to violate its own rules. First, when they took the embargo, as it is illegal and illegitimate, they rushed to manipulate and file their African Union. France intervened to adopt its European Union. But when they went to the United Nations, twice, Russia and China imposed their veto, because it is illegal. Because in countries without coasts like Mali, there is no text from the ECOWAS that authorizes this embargo. First, the text of the ECOWAS, the regulations and the statutes of the central bank interdict this financial embargo that they have imposed on our country. The same thing happened in Lehman. In fact, we took lawyers at the Court of Justice in Lehman. Mali won its trial, but the heads of state refused to apply. You violate your own laws. Secondly, there is what is called the Convention of the United Nations of Countries Without Coasts, which Mali ratified in 1987, which formally prohibits an embargo against a country without coasts. So from violation to violation, their objective was to enter a system of forced relations to overthrow the Malian government. So we understood that the ECOWAS finally abandoned its vocation of economic and financial organization to become a political organization manipulated by extra-African presidents. We made the necessary precautions. They did not understand. They imposed their embargoes against Mali. They went to the United Nations, held a summit of the ECOWAS at the United Nations, from violation to violation. The embargoes in Mali could not be justified. Burkina held. Now the case of Niger. It is the case of Niger that is extraordinary. They took into account the Nigerian embargo, the hardest, illegal, illegitimate, inhuman embargo. Children died in hospitals. People died of hunger. But what made us take the step? Because it is very important that Africans understand this. In Mali, terrorism lasted for years. They created a force called the G5 Sahel. All this was created and manipulated by France. The ECOWAS demanded for 4 years $400 million to function the G5 Sahel. They said there was no money. And suddenly, against Nigeria, the ECOWAS found $3 billion mobilized in a short time to finance the activities of the waiting force. What waiting force? Dormant since 2012. This waiting force was created in April 2012 at the invitation of the President of Senegal in April 2012. And since then, she has been waiting, she is sleeping. She decided to wake up in 2023 against Niger. The activities continued. We made all kinds of interventions. But the reality is that at the level of the ECOWAS, the heads of state of the ECOWAS have become a committee to which the French president gave instructions. Can you imagine that within the ECOWAS, even a part of the contributions. It is the European Union that pays them. In the offices of the Ecowas, there are offices for officers who represent the European Union. Even the officers who represent the countries of the ECOWAS within their offices there. We know that it was espionage that the European Union was doing. When they make the summits, when you look at the summits of the Ecowas, it is officials and ministers of foreign countries who attend the meetings. We wonder if it is for Mali, if it is for Africa, or if it is for the European Union and other powers. So the Ecowas had no independence of decision, so the objectives of the Founding Fathers were totally put in the background to make political policy. That was not enough. They found the $3 billion to mobilize a military force and attack Niger, overthrow the regime, to put the people they wanted at the head of this country. But on January 27th, that's why it's important for people to understand, we had the evidence that they organized themselves to make a military aggression against Niger and overthrow the regime. But after Niger, it will be Burkina. After Burkina, it will be Mali. They will kill in the egg this Pan-African feeling of the Africans. Even those who are on the line will be discouraged afterwards. But a military force to come and kill Nigerians. Not only did you kill Nigerians in the hospital, now kill the population to put someone you want in power. But we got together. On the 28th, we went out together and we put on guard that Mali and Burkina Faso stop next to their brothers. And we put the countries of ECOWAS on guard. The one that touches Niger, we will consider that it was a war against our three countries. That's what made them think. They wanted to train the cats in this war. It didn't work. We analyzed everything. A physical war to attack Niger. But this exit, it's not because we decided. The president of the IAS didn't get up the next day to go out. After that, Mali did 2 years in that. Burkina did 1 or 2 years in that. But in the end, they decided to go to a higher stage. Imagine when there is a regime change in Niger. They say there is a defense committee in France. When there is a regime change in another African country, they say they follow it carefully. But what is that? We said that we will not impose ourselves by using Africans who have no respect. Because we know the history. You know, every time Africa takes great steps, they intervene. You know, in Africa, when we created the great Pan-Africanist movement, the RDA, when we want to create sub-regional organizations, the initiatives come from there. We have the sense of history. Because all these sub-regional countries are entities emanating from the explosion of great empires like Ghana, Mali, the Songhai Empire. For example, the Dahomey. What people don't know, Dahomey is a non-Songhai. Daomenyo means in Songhai, it means where the limit of the earth is, all the north of Banala. Dendi, that is the name of Songhai. It means east in Songhai. Burkina, when you take the word Burkina, it is a Moorish word, but it is a Songhai word. Burkina means an integral name in Songhai. So all these entities are the same geographic entities. They are the colonizers who divided us. Niger, at the time of independence, there was a part of Mali that had to go to Niger. I was at the Agadez Mosque in 2023. It was built in 1450 to 1500. But this mosque was built by Saskia Mohammed. It means that we are the same people. In Mali, we have the meaning of history in everything we do. That's why we wait, we observe, but there are limits. We don't accept that we walk on our feet or that we treat African countries as less dear. There is an awakening of conscience to which the Malian government is dedicated, and our brothers joined us. So we decided to go out together and keep an eye on Africans who do the Nigerian service for Westerners. That's all. For the rest, there is no problem. We told all our African brothers to leave us alone. We let each country choose its own development path as it wants. Don't let us be instrumentalized to be in geopolitics, geostrategies of other countries. The conflict between the great powers, it's not ours. We are trying to solve our problems. And we said that the AES can work with the Ecowas. The fact that we made our alliance doesn't mean that we don't want to work with the Ecowas. Pan-Africanism can continue. The proof is that recently, when the president of Ghana was elected, he invited the presidents of the AES who left. The president of Burkina Faso left. The other presidents sent the prime ministers. So really there is no problem. Those who are saying that if we leave the Ecowas, we will be this, we will be that, but we existed before the Ecowas. There will be no problem. Now we want to scare people as if it were the end of the world. There will be difficulties, but it is in the difficulties that nations are forging. Facilities. Scaring us because of difficulties is a way of brainwashing us into mental and intellectual slavery. We will not accept it. So, cooperation. Live cooperation between the AES and the countries of the Ecowas, but not a disintegration of the AES to integrate an organization subject to the instructions and injunctions of foreign countries. As I told you, the Ecowas was no longer in its role. They recognize it now, but it's too late. We can't come back. Come and beat us all the time because they want a consensus. They will always demarcate people. They will come to a meeting, put minorities and impose their will. We are not in this. We want peace. We will work like friends. Terrorism was in Mali. At first we said it was Mali. We created the waiting force to fight terrorism in Mali. In 2013, terrorism was confined in the north of Mali, but then it returned to Burkina, Niger, and now it's Benin. Africans need to think. I think we need to understand. I already told you about the ambassadors I met here. They need to understand that there is a new generation in Africa that will no longer accept what happened. Those who are at the head of Mali need an intellectual coefficient, and I believe at the head of all AES countries. An intellectual coefficient that is far above what its colonizers think. They need to stop this way and make peace with our populations. There is no problem. We will work with the Ecowas as an AES country, the countries that want to work with us, but those who serve foreigners will find us on their path. We don't need anyone to enslave us. That's all. So, it is not a question of democracy, but we have already worked on people's mentalities to the point that they make us swallow what they want. So from the 90s, they managed to pass on to the Ecowas the idea according to which we are now doing politics. When the political regime changes, we have to take, depending on what they call the non-constitutional ways, we have to take sanctions against this country. But even in these sanctions, there was no question of embargo. It was never planned in the text of the Ecowas. Despite everything, what did we find? In 2021, the Ecowas here went from violation to violation. First, when there was the change of the regime of August 18th, 2020 in Mali. Do you know that this is not the conference of heads of state of the Ecowas that can sanction a country? But it is the president of the commission, a civil servant, who decides to sanction a sovereign state, which is Mali, after the regime change of August 18th, 2020. But that was not enough. When there was, we did the rectification. When France decided to put us on our knees, the Ecowas was put in full to play their game. The representative of the Ecowas here began to demarcate certain political leaders, the political class, to push them to refuse in accordance with the transition government. We followed him. When we saw all the elements, we asked the Ecowas to change their representative because he was delivering incompatible activities with his official mission. They dragged on for a month in the hope of overthrowing the regime because they made politicians believe that there should not be an agreement, because if the Malians agree, the Ecowas will be badly funded for the sake of the century. When we saw their bad faith, we sent them back to the non-gratifying declaration. There are ambassadors who have emigrated, who even came to my house. There is an ambassador who came to be the public lawyer. I told him that this representative of the Ecowas was dealing with activities incompatible with his official mission. He is not alone. I put him on guard, this ambassador. Then I gave instructions to the minister that was needed to summon him and put him on guard. He was sent back afterwards, as you all know, because he started with his head of state to interfere blatantly in our internal affairs.
And that the most shocking and surprising aspect is when they go for their ECOWAS meetings, it is France that will always conclude this meeting. No wonder whenever they go for these meetings, we always see them, the whites, in their meetings. No wonder when Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso decided to leave the bloc, these people still rose up to fight Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso for fighting for freedom, that they should come back and continue to suffer. You see, that there are people who still do not understand why we want to move out of ECOWAS, why we are fighting for our freedom, why we are fighting for our sovereignty. But these people, we need to really educate them for them to understand. This organization was supposed to be for the interest of Africa. It was supposed to champion the agenda of Africa. It was supposed to help us do away with these colonial restrictions and borders that they have imposed on us. For us to fight for a better Africa, for true sovereignty. But these people have found a way of turning the organization that was formed for the sovereignty of Africa to now turn against the same people. Malians are the ones who initiated this unity. This is a good thing that will come together because our strength lies in our unity. Just like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso decided to move out of the ECOWAS bloc to fight for their freedom, we've seen that others are fighting them. But if collectively, if we unite to fight for our freedom, there is no one that will be able to tear us apart. And that is why I think these ideas came. They called Nigeria, Nigeria bought into it, Ghana, Senegal, Togo, and now we have this organization. And now we have this organization called Ecowas. But we have used the unity to rather support the oppressor to keep robbing, stealing, looting, and destroying our continent so that they can build this. Why will you always go for meetings and the West? France will sit in that meeting, determine what you say. They even give us what you are coming to say, the topic. Like, it means that practically every move that you make, these people are aware. But they will never invite you to any of their meetings. Anything that is involving all their discussions, they never tell us. But we will always go and bring them into our meetings for them to know what we are planning, and then they decide whether what we want should be given to us. And this is what everybody is singing: democracy, ECOWAS, democracy, ECOWAS. This should tell us that any leader in your country that is fighting for ECOWAS and asking people to come and join ECOWAS, you have to think twice and know that that person is not a Pan-Africanist. Because with what I am hearing from this Mali Prime Minister, none of them is having Africa at heart. They only go and sit down so that what the West wants will keep happening. They need to decide what other plans they will use to loot Africa and not to use it for the benefit of Africa. If so, these people would have teamed up by now with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso for us to have a better Africa. For us to fight together, not supporting France to go and fight Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, simply because they have decided to take their freedom into their own hands. Must we continue to be slaves? Must we be living like poor people in our own continent with all the natural resources that we have? So when will Africa rise up and fight its own cause? These people don't invite you in their meetings. Why is that always African Union, Ecowas, whatsoever meetings the Africans will have, the white people must be there? So how do you move? How do you plan when your enemy is always in your midst? It's so painful. So let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters so we'll give a better Africa and upbringing to our next generations. We need to fight for Africa, for the other generations that are coming, to have a better Africa and to live like kings and queens as we rightfully deserve. Our strength lies in our unity. United we stand, divided we fall. So that's the latest around the world in Africa, West Africa, and in Mali.